today I am very excited today to be in the house of a living legend himself, son of a living legend. I'm talking about no other person than Dr. Julius Garvey. Dr. Julius Garvey, I was privileged, opportune to have met him when I used to be a deputy mayor, and I think that was in 2016 or so thereabout. I led a delegation to Accra, Ghana, for the summit of all mayors and leaders of African descent, and I had the great opportunity to meet him. So today, I am in his house, and we're getting ready to do this episode. So I'm going to let him to introduce himself before we get into it. But before we start that, I want to thank all of you, our viewers that are watching us today from all parts of the world. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for supporting Common Sense Africa podcast. Common Sense Africa podcast, Doc, is a platform where all people of African descent come together to talk about solutions, how to better Africa. So that's why we're doing it. So it doesn't matter where you're from. You could be African Chinese, African Caribbean, African European. It doesn't matter. So we want to unify. The whole idea is for us to unify. And the reason why I'm so excited about this is because that's what your father stood for. That's what you stand for. I know that for sure. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself to our viewers, and then we just delve into it.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, you're going to have to excuse me. I'm not sure I can handle the last name. I'm going to just call you Mayor Hugo.
Just call me Ugo. Ugo is fine. Just not even mayor. Just Ugo.
Because
Ugo
that's
is
where I
fine.
know you from being deputy
That
mayor of
that's
Lower.
right. That's right.
So we go back a long way. But basically, I'm Julius Garvey, second son of Marcus Garvey. I had an older brother. He died about a year ago.
Bless his
Um,
soul.
yeah, but he was 90 years of age, so he lived a good life. So no complaints there.
Right.
And I am retired cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon.
Right.
And of course, I've been influenced by my father's work and my mother's upbringing because both of them are avid Pan Africanists, shall we say. And
Right.
as I hope all of your listeners know,
Right.
that my father created the organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, which was the major Pan African organization
Right.
of the first half of the 20th century. So
Right.
here I am.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that intro. You are so modest. He just rushed through it. But he is a surgeon of world repute. He is a renowned surgeon, an educator too. He's a professor and all that. So and he's somebody that I have great respect. So Dr. Garvey, I know you are. Yes, your father was a big time Pan Africanist, a big time civil rights leader, and all that stuff, a Jamaican hero, and all whatnot. But you on your own, you are also a big Pan Africanist because that's how I met you. So before I get into talking about you, let's talk about how is the movement about granting clemency to your great father for what he's done. How is that movement going, and how can our viewers, support that movement too? Because I'm interested. I want to know how we can support
Yeah.
because I think he deserves that. He doesn't deserve what they did to him. So he deserves clemency, and we shouldn't even be begging or trying to. He deserves it because he was treated very badly. So it wasn't supposed to happen like that.
Yes, no question about it. It was a major injustice that has stayed on the books, shall we say, of the United States of America in terms of its judiciary for 100 years. And, what we're looking for is the exoneration of Marcus Garvey. And it's important to use that word
Yes,
because exoneration means that, no crime was
or
committed.
committed,
There
and
was
no crime was committed. I checked it all out. He
precisely,
didn't do anything.
precisely. And it's a movement, therefore, to correct the injustice of the law courts and the political trial that existed at that point in time because Marcus Garvey was the major Pan African figure, major civil rights figure in the United States with a following in his movement of 6 million and up,
Right.
which posed a threat not only to the apartheid system here in the United States, but to the whole colonial structure around the world, meaning the
Right.
British and the French in particular. So
Right.
this was an attempt to destroy the organization through destroying the leader. So we have applied to President Biden when President Obama when he was president, and then subsequently now to President Biden
Right.
to use the implements that they have, which would
Right.
be a presidential posthumous pardon,
Right.
which would have to say that no crime was committed
Of
and
course.
this was an injustice, and they're trying to right that injustice. So, in terms of people helping, they can certainly write their Congress person and so on. We had a petition in the month of February, which got over 100,000 signatures, a petition to President Biden calling for the posthumous pardon of Marcus Garvey. We have not had a response from the president at this point in time. So, I think people who are connected politically, or just the average citizen, can speak to their own congressperson or whatever representative they have in terms of government to see that this message does get to the president and it becomes a significant political issue at this point in time.
Right.
Because we're still on the crest of Black Lives Matter, as you know.
Right.
Since the murder of George Floyd and so on.
Right.
The stark inhumanity of the system has been exposed once again.
Right.
With Albury and all of the other killings that we have seen.
Right.
So we're still on a quest for justice as African people in the United States,
Right.
as well as around the world.
Right. Good. So now, judging from what you just said and what I read about too, I think your father, the great Marcus Garvey, was a man that was ahead of his time because he was, I think, because he had so much followers, what he was doing, and 6 million plus followers. I think that is why these people couldn't handle that pressure. So that's why they just framed something around him and then put that on him in order to get him deported and put him away from America. So I think he deserves justice. He deserves exoneration. So is there like a website or something or where our viewers can go to maybe sign a signature or join the petition for the exoneration? Is there something like that?
Well, the petition at the present time is closed. There is the website is still in existence, but like I said, the petition was confined to the month of February because it required a specific period of time to get a certain number of signatures, which was 100,000, which we did get.
Oh, great.
So
Okay.
ongoing, it's not so much a matter of petition as it is for political pressure to be brought at whatever level. For example, through the Congressional Black Caucus.
Right.
For example, Yvette Clarke, who is the congresswoman for New York, as you
Okay,
know,
Yvette Clarke. She's a
Brooklyn,
good friend, yes.
she has House Resolution 148 before the House, which is now before the House Judiciary Committee, calling for the exoneration of Marcus Garvey. So those are the efforts that are continuing. They're political efforts in those different areas.
Okay, good. So now is a political effort and it's already in the Congress because the Honorable Yvette Clarke is handling it and leading that movement. So, but I still want you, our viewers, please join your voice, join whatever you can. If you hear this, like Dr. Garvey said, call your congressperson, your congressman, congresswoman, lend your voice to this cause, lend your voice to this movement for the exoneration of the great Marcus Garvey. He's a man that, if not for him, I wonder if somebody like me would even be living in America. I doubt that. Yes, of course. Later on, Martin Luther King Jr. and the rest of them paved the way. But these are the people that started this whole thing. So on that note, I just want to thank you for the work that he's done, for what he's done and what you're doing.
Well,
So
let me just give you an anecdote there. Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, who was an Igbo, who was the governor of Nigeria after its independence.
right.
He was an avid Garveyite.
Oh,
And he invited my mother
Okay.
to Nigeria in 1960
really?
at the time of independence. Yes, and while she was there, she met Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, and so on. But so my family is connected in that way
Okay,
to
good.
Nigeria, and
Okay.
maybe specifically to the Igbo.
That's right, because Nnamdi
So
Azikiwe
that's
was
why
an
you're
Igbo man. So to you Africans and the Igbos, the great Zik of Africa was a Garveyism. So he believed in that. He was a Garveyisian. So you should, you in Nigeria, if you're listening to us from Nigeria, you can also do some from anywhere in Africa, as a matter of fact. So I mean, Dr. Garvey did a whole lot. Was not only that he was a great entrepreneur, he did a lot of things. He created jobs, he created opportunities for black people all over the world. So he deserves this, his name to be cleared. So on that note, Doc, is there anything else you want to talk to us about your dad before we continue on the African Pan Africanism?
Well, he was the major Pan Africanist of the first half of the 20th century and laid the foundation for Pan Africanism. Because, as you know, Pan Africanism essentially started outside of the continent of Africa.
That's right.
Because, those of us who had been enslaved,
right,
we were always looking back to the continent in terms of our traditions, in terms of our culture, even though we had lost language, but we still had the memories of our traditions and our culture. Right. So we saw Africa as a continent, as a home,
right,
more so than a specific tribe or a specific ethnicity, because we came from so many different parts of Africa, not just from the Yoruba or from the Igbo,
right,
but also from Congo, Angola,
right,
from the Ashanti, and so on. So we were a mixed bag, and we saw ourselves as Africans, right, as opposed to having a tribal identity. So in some sense, we were ahead of the continent.
That's right.
In terms of seeing, us as a people, and that's part of my father's message. Right. Africa for the Africans, for those Africans at home and those abroad. Right. So he brought that to the fore, and he influenced many people.
Right.
We talked about Nandi Azikiwe, but I would say Kwame Nkrumah.
Right.
Was certainly one of the major, politicians or Pan-Africanists that he influenced.
That's correct.
And Kwame Nkrumah said that himself. And of course, the 1945 Manchester Conference, right, which brought together so many Pan-Africanists who were to become Pan-Africanists. There were African people, African students, etc., right, who had studied in the United States and in England and who had been influenced by my dad. So out of that 1945 conference, Pan-Africanism spread to the African continent. Right. Again, with people like Kwame Nkrumah, people like Jomo Kenyatta, Nandi Azikiwe, and a gentleman from Malawi, and so on. Right. So all of those people were there and took it back to the continent. Right. And of course, then, the continent started to become independent from colonialism from 1957 with Ghana, right, and then in the 60s, Nigeria in 1960, right, and so on. Right. So that was the forerunner of that whole anti-colonial movement, and right, the civil rights movement was basically, I would say, based on my father's work.
That's correct. Right. It looks to me like in those days, those folks, we are more into the cause of Africa than it is today, because I see that even up to date, those are the Africans in the diaspora are more Pan-Africanist than the Africans in the continent, and you folks here, are doing more for the movement, for the upliftment of Africa than those that are in Africa. Why do I say this? I see most of the countries in Africa look up to the West to come and help them with this or come and guide them or show them the way forward and all that, So, but those folks, us, including myself now that is in diaspora, we believe that Africa, like your father believed, should be for Africans, and the problem of Africa can only be solved by Africans. So now, I want you to assess or tell me why it's like the momentum has slowed down from what your father them we are doing. Namda Azikiwe, Kwame Hussein Nkrumah, and the rest of Jomo Kenyatta and the rest of them. So it's like what they are doing. Their work has slowed down. How do we kind of like get back the momentum? How do we restart that so that we can continue on the path of trying to unite all people of African descent? Because why do I say this? That was the reason why we founded Common Sense Africa podcast, so that we can, in our own little way, get all people of African descent unite to better Africa, like the Africa that you described. Africa without borderless Africa, Africa without ethnicism or division and all those things. Africa that is, you can move from one Africa to the other Africa without anybody telling you, oh, you're from this tribe or you're from this part and all that. How do we get that momentum back? How do we get that Africa of our dream?
It's very complicated. My father said that people without the knowledge of their history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots.
Right.
And if we look at what has happened with colonialism, which was the second phase of the invasion of Africa, first you had the invasion that produced the enslavement
Right.
of large numbers of Africa, which removed probably in excess of 50 million Africans from the continent, 15 million of which ended up here in the West. But large numbers died in Africa itself in terms of the wars that produced the enslaved people. Large numbers died in the Atlantic, etc.
Right.
So there was a significant destruction of African civilizations and African empires that took place during that period from the 15th century to the 19th century. So that was phase one, shall we say, of the invasion of Africa by Europeans. All of them: France, England, Belgium, Germany, etc. Phase two then was 1884, 1885 with the Berlin Conference, and the cutting up of Africa and giving different pieces to different colonial powers. So then we had colonialism, we had enslavement, we had colonialism. And African people kept fighting. We fought against slavery, and we were able to abolish slavery. We fought against colonialism. We were able to become independent. But if you look at what had happened during those periods of time, we became disconnected from our own selves in terms of our history, in terms of our culture, in terms of our traditions. Because the infiltration was not only physical in that sense, but it was also educational, it was also religious, and it was also cultural. Each one of those colonial entities that I mentioned brought with them their culture, their religion, their ways of doing things, and utilized the resources, human and otherwise, of the colonists to subsidize the metropole at home. So the economy of all of the countries in Africa, and certainly the colonies in the Caribbean and so on and so forth, wealth was taken from the colonies and taken to the colonizers. So even at the time of independence, there was no infrastructure that was present, so that the country now that was independent did not have the ability to really develop itself for itself from its own resources. It was still tied economically
to the
and even culturally and educationally. Because during that period of colonization, the educational system that was paramount was the colonizers' educational system. So they sent a certain number of elite to their schools in England, the Oxford and the Cambridge, or to France, to their elite schools there or wherever, to learn the ways of the colonizers, they could come back and be the intermediaries in terms of government and management of the system that the colonizer put in place. So there you have the basis of what happened now at independence. There was minimal infrastructure, minimal people who were really well educated. Those who were educated by the colonizer in terms of his system. So they tended to perpetuate the system. Those who stood against the system and had freed their minds from mental slavery, as my father would have said, that we must free our minds from mental slavery, because while others may free the body, we must free our minds. Those people were assassinated, marginalized, coups were created against them, and we have just now a tooth from Patrice Lumumba was repatriated to the Congo. I mean, this is so sad. The Congolese killed 10 million people.
But the Belgians.
The Belgians killed 10 million people. And there we have the prince or some of the, I don't want to say certain things
No, no,
on,
no.
on
Go
your
ahead.
show.
So,
No, but
yeah.
going to the Congo and being welcome.
Right.
I mean, no apology, and
That
we
no,
don't
no,
we don't
no.
need
I
apologies. I
know
mean, but no admitting of the
of the
atrocity.
atrocities. Yes,
10
absolutely.
million,
Right, right, right.
ten ten
I
million
know.
people in 10 years.
I know.
I mean,
I,
this is a
yeah.
disgrace.
You see, the world has not acknowledged the enormous destruction
Mm-hmm.
that slavery brought. Like every time they talk about the most heinous crime committed by man, they talk about the Holocaust. They
Mm-hmm.
talk about, but nobody. You just mentioned 50 million
Mm-hmm.
Africans
Mm-hmm.
that were taken away.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of them died on their way
Mm-hmm.
coming here.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody talks about
No,
that.
no.
So now then the colonizers came. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to give you like you're talking about the still benefit up to date from what is happening in Africa. A country like France still had the nerve after they had colonized, after they had stolen, after they had destroyed, when they were leaving, when the people did not want to agree to the arrangement, the new arrangement,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to the colonial pact, so that a pact that even insulted Africans more, a pact that you're going to be paying taxes on the benefits of colonization.
Mm-hmm.
So they had African countries, 14 of them, to sign into that. You forced them when Sekou Touré didn't want to sign.
Mm-hmm.
What did France do? France, when they are leaving, okay, they're going to leave, they destroyed everything, the little infrastructure that they built. They destroyed everything. They poisoned food. They destroyed agricultural things. These are the people that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So it is a shame that African leaders of these days will look up to those people instead of looking out to the Africans in the diaspora, because Africa can only be developed by Africans. No offense to anybody. This is not talking down on anybody. I can assure you that Africa will only be developed by Africans.
This is an absolute reality because, and this is one of the problems that I see because we have not been educated properly. We have been miseducated, as Carter G. Woodson would have it back in the 30s, when we use the same educational system of the people who have enslaved and colonized us. Then we don't understand the truth of the system. For example, we started talking about slavery, and then we started talking about colonialism. But then, as Kwame Nkrumah told us, there's neocolonialism,
Of course, that's what is happening
which
today.
which is what is called globalization.
Yeah,
You see, so the name changes.
but intentions are still the same.
It's just now a global plantation.
Yeah, that's
We're
right.
still on the plantation,
That's
but
right.
it's a global plantation.
That's right.
And the enslavers and the colonizers, what they've done is they've retreated behind the systems. So you can't point to any one person like, Leopold of Belgium. But what they have now is what was created after the Second World War.
That's correct.
You see, meaning in 1944, there was the Bretton Woods Conference of the Allies.
Of the allies, yes.
You see, and I think Russia was also present there in terms of Bretton Woods.
You're right.
But it was largely an American and English hegemony.
That's right.
That was perpetrated from there, because from there we got the IMF and we got the
The World Bank.
You see, subsequently we got the World Trade Organization,
right.
but in 1945 we got the United Nations.
Right.
So African countries now were able to vote in the General Assembly.
Right.
But the Security Council, which was the overarching
It's still
powerful body,
right.
there's no
Veto,
African representative.
right. And they have the veto power.
So all of these institutions have replaced colonialism
That's right.
as the way to maintain hegemony around African and people of color.
Right.
But many people don't understand that. For example, the IMF was initially set up to help Europe regain its status after World War II, when they destroyed each other.
Just like Russia is destroying Ukraine now, then somebody has to pay for it.
Well, I think the rest of the world is.
That's
paying
right. They're paying
in
America.
some sense, And as you can see, Biden and other people are sending billions of dollars there.
Correct. Yeah, but the thing though is they're sending billions, but there are Africans, African Americans, the minorities in Americans that don't have opportunities that need this money.
This
How
is
come
why
nobody?
we have to
Yeah,
understand.
how come?
This is
I
why we have
mean,
to understand the history. You see, the propaganda is that as African Americans or as Africans, well, gee, we have made progress.
right,
What does that mean that we have made progress when millions of Africans still die every year from starvation?
right,
Millions are uneducated. When you have the IMF conditionalities that tell you that you can't spend money on education,
right,
you can't spend money on medical care and on hospitals.
right,
You have to spend your money to repay the debt that has been put on you
right,
by the IMF with its loans and so on.
right,
So you have a system that is rigged,
right,
okay? And it doesn't matter how it shows itself superficially as being enslaved,
right,
colonized, or near colonized.
right.
It's the same
The same
system
thing.
of white
The same.
supremacy.
That's right. The
And
same.
this is what we have to understand, that
That's
it is
right.
the same system.
That's right.
And while it is moderated to some degree superficially,
Right.
and while some of our own people have been co-opted into the system,
That's right.
like now neocolonialism is not maintained in Africa by quote white people.
It's by Africans.
It's maintained in Africa by
Right.
Africans
Right.
whose
Right.
minds have been co-opted
Right.
by Europeans. And even the African Union, when they want to do something, they go to the EU
Right.
to find
Right.
out what they should do, or looking for help to do it. I
That's
mean,
right.
this is a remarkable degree of impotence in terms of a continent that represents, more than 1 billion people.
Right. I mean, you look at it. I give you an example, and again, it was designed. It wasn't. It didn't just happen from nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
The colonialists designed it because all these countries they took a bunch of nations that were independent nations before the colonialists came in and bunched them. Bundled them into a country that they did not discuss. They were not part of accepting or deciding whether they wanted to be part of that country. Nobody educated them on the benefit thereof or none or whatever, but he just bundled them and put them and created this confusion. And the colonialists were the figure holding all of them together by force, divide and conquer. But when they left, now it now dawned on these nations, independent nations, that we got to live together. Nobody had prepared us for that. There's no education. So now they are fighting. That is why democracy as practiced in Africa, it will be hard for any country to make progress, except if you go back to the drawing board. If you go back to the basics, to the beginning, and say, okay, let's discuss. We are independent nations. Let's now talk about how to move forward. That's like in Nigeria. That is the problem we have in Nigeria. The only country that seemed to have found a way to solve that problem is Rwanda. Recently, after the Hutus and the Tutsis war, they eliminated ethnic divide. The Rwandese no longer see themselves as somebody from this tribe or that tribe. Everybody's Rwandese. And look at the tremendous progress that they're making. So I think our Pan-Africanist movement has to now move beyond just uniting people of Africa. We have to eliminate all these ethnic divide since we want to be one country, like in Nigeria. There's no reason why the Fulanese or the Hausas should be dominating or kind of like doing the same thing, the same thing that the white man did to the other ethnic groups, all because you have the backing of Britain. You're doing their bidding for them. Instead of you to find peace amongst yourselves, and find a way to live. No, you want to grab it all. And when you grab it, you're not developing the country. You're taking everything back to them. You're taking the money to Britain, to America, to Dubai, developing those places and your country. So how do we solve this problem? How do we get an Africa that will work for the whole of Africa? How do we get that mindset? Because you talked about the education. It's the miseducation, not even education. Because a lot of them, like you said, the elite, they took them to the Western world and quote unquote, they thought they were getting educated, but they were being miseducated. They were being brainwashed. So that when the colonialists will leave, you will be doing their bidding. It happened like you talked about the Congo. Patrice Lumumba was killed, and especially the French African country. The French designed it that way. You know? So that is why if they want to get a military education, it has to be in France. If they want to do interact with the rest of the world, it has to be authority from the France first. How do you explain you have independence, but 85% of your national treasury will be banked in France?
Not only that, but France has a veto,
Veto
over it.
Over it too.
Yeah.
It has to veto it. You got to explain what you're doing with your money.
Yeah.
And if you're withdrawing over 25%, they got to charge you
You
your
have-
money.
you have to
They
pay-
charge you have to
pay
pay interest. So
on
how do
foreign
you explain that? I mean, you're looking at, and that's where, like we talked about earlier, the United Nations, which I think is also a scam by itself, because it's not. Why should 5 countries have veto power? Whatever we decide on doing, if France says no, the same France says no, it will not happen. America says no, it will not happen. Russia says no. China says no, it will not happen. Why should the UK says no? Those 5 countries. So Africa should unite, find a way to have some type of arrangement whereby, even if we just to have the arrangement that is like the EU, for instance, why can't Africa have that? Have a common, trade, common currency for all Africans. Now it's a shame that I'm in Nigeria, I'm spending my naira now, or all of a sudden my friend is getting married in across, the other side of the world, Accra, Ghana. I got to go to Ghana. Guess the first thing I got to do? I have to use my naira that they already devalued to go and chase dollar, buy dollar 1st, then I secure dollar. Now I travel to Ghana. When I get to Ghana, listen to this. When I get to Ghana, I got to use the same dollar will lose more value because I'm not going to use it to buy cedi in Ghana in order to have money to spend. As against if we have one African currency, whereby I don't have to change, I don't have to lose value. Even I'm living from Nigeria to Ghana to Cameroon to South Africa, it's the same thing. That's what they enjoy in Europe. Why can't Africans think like that? But like you said, the World Bank will block against it. The IMF will block against it. Why? Why isn't what is good for the geese good for the gander?
It's you've mentioned it several times in terms of the mindset, and you have to understand the European mindset. And again, we can simplify it by calling it, white supremacy in that sense. And it is based on materialism per se, and what's been called scientific materialism. And this is how the West has developed. As you know, we don't have to go through this in detail.
Right.
But the industrial development was based on the extraction of resources and the extraction of labor
Right.
from African people. And those resources and labor was never paid back.
Right.
So that has been basically 500 years of stripping us of our wealth
Right.
and accumulating it here in the United States, etc. Other countries, and of course we talked about the 2 world wars. We didn't talk about the first, but in any event, then America became the major power subsequent to World War II because of the Marshall Plan, all the money that was lent to Europe, etc., and taking over the status of the colonizers who could no longer control their colonies. And they did that by virtue of the IMF and the World Bank and so on. So what you can see is a continued development of the globalized oppressive structure
Right.
that was created in Europe, and
Right.
that came out of again the 15th century, etc., 16th century enslavement,
Right.
the so-called Enlightenment, which was that whole intellectual movement that how should I say it, glorified the enslavement or gave them an excuse for
Right.
enslavement
Right.
by downgrading Africa and Africans in terms of history,
Right.
saying that we had no history
Right.
and that we were savages. And of course they accomplished that by burning the books,
Of course.
writing us out of history, and and claiming all of these things as inventions of themselves,
Right.
and everything starting with Greece, etc., etc.
Right.
And as I said, rewriting history, turning everything upside down,
Right.
when we are the original people. That's been
That's right.
proven over
That's
and
right.
over and over
That's
again.
that's right.
We are the original civilizations,
Right.
Nile Valley civilizations, over and over and over again.
Right.
And there were so many different African inventions that were brought to the world. And Europe itself was behind
Right.
Africa all the way up to the 15th century.
Right.
You see, but they have rewritten all of this.
Right.
You see, because again, the Moors and the Arabs and so on, civilized
Right.
now Europe.
Right.
It wasn't until the 15th century that Europe, shall we say, rose again.
Right.
So we have to understand that it is not in the interest of the European to change the system.
Right.
Because in some sense, he can't change the system because his whole way of life
Right.
is based on this falsification of history
Right.
and his own identity
Right.
as a superhuman being.
That's correct.
And everybody else is inferior. And of
Right.
course, black people are at the end of the scale.
Right.
They put maybe the Asians somewhere in between and
Right.
put us at the bottom.
Right.
That is their system, certainly that they've created at least from the 16th, 17th century onwards.
Right.
Again, this was to justify slavery, which was the basis of their industrial revolution.
Right.
So their whole wealth and all of the systems that have been generated to protect that,
Right.
and their intellectual systems that have come down to us through educational processes.
Right.
These are all excuses for white supremacy and,
Right.
and the domination of the world by white people.
Right.
So, when Africans look at it at the present time, we cannot think that that is going to change in such a way
Right.
that we are going to be absorbed into this system somehow on an equal basis.
That's correct.
And we need to look no further than George Floyd,
Right.
where a policeman was able to kneel on his neck for almost 9 minutes, killing him, a public execution.
That's
We've had
right.
all kinds about it, but that
Right.
was the
Official
most
public
execution.
execution. Yes.
Now, if you do not understand that the system is not made for you, then what the heck is going to make you understand? So that's the problem with the educational system and the mindset.
That's
We
right.
still believe that system can be modified to accommodate us.
That's right.
When for 500 years or more,
Right.
it has simply transformed itself
Right.
from a system of enslavement to a system of colonization
Right.
to a system of globalization.
Right.
We have to wake up.
That's right. Dr. Garvey, I'm getting signs for us to take a little break. So we're going to take a little break now and we continue from our break.
Of